Jay Traverse from Minneapolis brings up the Browns' assistant coaches. He says, "Hey, Mary Kay, don't you think it's unusual that a team with a losing record had so many assistant coaches taken by other teams?" And I start with this because, of course, the news on Sunday that Drew Petzing was officially hired. He's going to Arizona to be the offensive coordinator. You reported that a week earlier that was likely to happen. So Petzing really the most prominent position coach to leave. But the question here, even though the Browns have struggled, their assistant coaches are getting hired. So why do you think that's happening?
Well, there's an explanation for that. And this is a really good question because a lot of people probably don't wonder this. And it does give us a chance to illuminate the situation a little bit. So a lot of times what happens when a new coordinator comes in and they want to have some positions on their staff that are going to be open, you have conversations with all of the assistants. And you kind of, you're pretty open and honest with the ones where you're probably going to want to place a new assistant in that spot. And in so doing, sometimes, the team even helps an assistant find a new situation. So I think in the case of Chris Kiffin and Jeff Howard, I think this was an opportunity for Kevin Stefanski and for Jim Schwartz to add a couple of new assistants. And I think it was probably, pretty clear that these guys were welcome to find other opportunities. So this wasn't a situation where they got pulled up to be defensive coordinators somewhere. They basically made lateral moves to another position. And, it's a win-win. It's good for them. It's good for the new team that got to hire some really good coaches. And it also gives Jim Schwartz and Kevin Stefanski an opportunity to fill some really important roles.
What's next for the Browns at that quarterback coach position as they look to fill that? Do you think it's more likely that it comes internally, maybe Alex Van Pelt or someone else on the staff? You've mentioned T.C. McCartney as an option, or do you think they will cast a somewhat wide net here to try and find the replacement?
It's a great question. Now, if we remember back to 20 and 21, they did not have a designated quarterbacks coach per se. They didn't have that until they made Drew Petzing the quarterbacks coach last season, promoting him from tight ends coach. And then this year in 2022, they put T.C. McCartney onto the tight ends, taking him off of offensive assistant, assisting with quarterbacks in 20 and 21. But he really didn't have the title of, quarterbacks assistant. He was just offensive assistant. So that's one of the options. They could just say, hey, we've got Kevin Stefanski calling the plays. We've got Alex Van Pelt, who's not calling the plays, but still is offensive coordinator. Do we really need a designated quarterbacks coach? I would say yes. So I think the chances are probably pretty good that they will do that. But, it's not written in stone. We don't know exactly yet what Kevin Stefanski is going to do. We will have an opportunity to talk to him next week. So either they'll have the coaches in place by the time they head off to the combine. That would be ideal. Or he will, maybe finalize some of those plans there. I'm guessing he'd probably try to wrap it up by this week if he can, but there's no pressure to get that done. So we'll have to see how that goes. Again, it would probably be ideal if Jim Schwartz had his two important defensive assistants by the time they head to the combine, but certainly not a deal breaker for assembling a staff.
Yeah, and on the defensive side, you're looking at those guys. You'd like to have some coaches, in that box with you to, watching those guys, going through the interviews with guys, things like that. And obviously all that stuff gets taped, so they can always go back if they aren't on staff. But you're not drafting a quarterback, or if you are, you're certainly not drafting a starting quarterback. So you kind of know who that guy is going to be. So not quite the sense of urgency there necessarily. So before we get back to free agency, another